Hey, this is Nathan with Town Hall Project. It is my great pleasure to be here again with Senator Ron Wyden, who is both my own personal senator and a absolute Town Hall superstar, winner of our 2017 MVP award for the Senate. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you're doing, because to me, town hall meetings are the currency of democracy. Being out there, making yourself available to everybody in kind of open to all, unscripted kinds of opportunities is what the Founding Fathers had in mind.
Great, and thank you for holding a town hall today. So we spoke, I believe, last December. You've held several dozen town hall meetings since then. What have you been hearing from Oregonians as you've traveled around the state?
To me, you sense from Oregonians, and I closed with it, is what will it take to have government that is more caring and more decent to all? I think a lot of people look at what is coming out of the Congress right now. For example, there's a farm bill coming from the House of Representatives that I think would be so unfair at a time when we've got so many hungry people. Oregonians are concerned about turning back the clock on health care. If you go to most of my town meetings, Oregonians are talking about what they want to do to go forward, and in particular, take strong action to hold down the costs of medicine, and yet they hear about Washington, D.C. turning back the clock. So that's what folks at home are talking about.
Cool. And what do you maybe wish you were hearing more, or what do you think isn't on people's radar that actually is very significant?
Today, I think you saw we talked for about 90 minutes, and nobody had brought up campaign finance. And that was why I really ended the meeting and said, look, we've been talking about healthcare, we've been talking about environmental issues, we've been talking about tax unfairness, not tax fairness. And I think right at the foundation of those challenges is this incredibly unfair campaign finance system embodied in Citizens United. I mean, Citizens United basically says that the rich guy's checkbook and the poor guy's soapbox are basically the same thing. And I think that's about as unfair as it gets.
So you bring up Citizens United, which is obviously a Supreme Court case. Probably nothing more important going on for the Senate right now. Possibly, the most important thing a senator does is a Supreme Court nomination vote. What can you tell people who are, maybe confused, frustrated, they see what feels like a rush process?
Well, the first thing I tell them is that the two senators from Oregon, Jeff Merkley and myself, because we were able to get the time to make sure that all the documents came out with respect to a very flawed nominee, we were able to make a big difference in the justice system, and our work, Oregon's two United States senators, really helped to defeat a flawed nominee. I think it was the first time that someone in the Trump nominee roster had been defeated, and I think it was because we had an individual who misled our bipartisan judicial selection committee process. We had the time to get the record out, and that's why I think it's so important that all the documents relevant to Judge Kavanaugh's career be made available to the Senate.
Cool. And so people who maybe aren't from Oregon, should they be contacting their senators? Are there other steps?
Absolutely. Political change doesn't start in Washington, D.C. or a government building in your state capital and then trickle down. Instead of trickle down, it's bottoms up. So now is an absolutely crucial time to be in touch with your elected officials. There are issues, particularly with the Supreme Court nomination and the possibility you could have a nominee who would change the composition of the court, turn back the clock on women's health care, women's privacy, pre-existing condition protections. This is an extraordinarily important time for people to be involved.
Right. And I don't know if you know, this August only two Republican senators have held town halls, both in Iowa, Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst. So if your senator's not holding a town hall, make sure to call them, office visits. There are other ways of making your voice heard. So a lot of issues, that people talk about fall into convenient, left versus right, red team versus blue team, but a lot of policy doesn't. And we had one question from one of our followers about, and I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest, the Music Modernization Act, and I think you have a related bill or a parallel bill, the Access Act?
Yeah, I'm for the Music Modernization Act. There have been a couple of additions that have been added on at the request, really, of powerful interests that groups like the American Library Association don't favor. My hope is we'll be able to work the issues out.
Cool. And have you heard from Oregonians on that issue?
Yeah, I've heard from some. I was assuming that folks might come to the town hall meeting today, and I would have welcomed them.
Yeah, well, if you have strong feelings on this issue one way or another, make sure your lawmakers know. So last time we spoke, I asked what you would say to your colleagues who aren't holding town hall meetings. So we've got that, but we are currently doing what we call our Town Hall Pledge program, directly inspired by your own pledge you took to hold town halls in every single county. We're simply asking candidates for Congress to hold 4 town halls per year once in office. We've got almost 200 who've taken it, which means a lot still haven't. As someone who took your own pledge and have actually fulfilled it for several years, what would you say to them about the value to you as a lawmaker?
Well, I would just say, and as we've talked about, I'm not going to criticize any colleagues. I don't think there's a substitute for this. I mean, the more technology we have, the more important it is for elected officials to be up in front of their constituents, where their constituents can look them in the eye, ask their question, and get an unscripted answer. Now, I know that their political consultants are always telling people to not get off message and don't get into unscripted moments, and in effect use your campaign to get out the issues you care about. And I'm sure that certainly there's some exposure when somebody in the audience is out there with the phone. And I said plenty of stuff in my time in public service that I regret, but I continue to believe that there is no substitute for being out with citizens, letting them look you in the eye and hold folks accountable.
Great. Final question. So Town Hall Project has been working with some of the young people from March for Our Lives from Parkland, Florida, on a series of town hall meetings across the country, and it's been really exciting for us to see how many young people everywhere, are becoming engaged really for the first time. And it's, for us, it's interesting to see how much passion and energy there is, but also very quickly frustration once they understand how difficult change is to make politically. Would you, offer anything to young people who are becoming engaged?
The first thing I'd say to young people is that young people really must have set a land speed record for being the driving force in bringing about the change in marriage equality. I was the first senator who came out for marriage equality back in 1995. Most Democrats weren't for it. Most labor folks weren't for it. There were members of the gay community who told me, you shouldn't stake out this ground because we don't want to lose you. But I said, look, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one. I'm a Democrat with a pretty strong libertarian streak. And it wasn't very long after that, because so many young people, and I want to underline, young people told their elected officials, we got real problems. We had people asking about student loans and jobs and being able to get ahead economically and healthcare costs. And these young people said to their members of Congress, to candidates, they said, what are you doing talking about who somebody is going to marry when we got all of these big problems? And young people really led the effort for marriage equality, which in terms of civil rights, progress passed in sort of land speed record times. And I do think we're just a few votes short of a policy that would keep more guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. And when we get it done, it is going to be due to young people, and I particularly want to credit Eva Jones, who was a high school sophomore, came to one of my town hall meetings, gave a phenomenal presentation. We brought him back to Washington, and I think she really impressed a lot of senators.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and see you at the next town hall.
Thanks for what you're doing.
All right.
Take good care.
Thanks, Senator.